Ciao. Gay Satanism Art Journal SatanArt Number 25. SatanArt is a visual addition to the Grimoire Gay Lust. The album theme is Russian support for the evil of fascism-rashism, their degradation and damnation by Satan. Documentary photographs of the herd nature of Putinism's critters. The names of the paintings in English. The album SatanArt Number 25 was compiled by the satanic faggot of His Majesty Satan Antichrist SlutSodomia, aka Satanist SlutSodomia. I dedicate SatanArt Number 25 to the fight against the evil of fascism. Let the damnation of Russians be a reminder of what happens to nations that support evil, are proud of evil, and want to spread their degradation among other nations through war and propaganda. Russians are herd animals that live like the orcs of Mordor and worship the most harmful Sauron. The creatures of Russian Mordor do not need freedom and spirituality. Russians have rejected Satan and Satanism. The documentary album SatanArt Number 25 is a continuation of the artistic album SatanArt Number 24. Both of these albums are dedicated to racism and Russian evil, but the form of the images is different. SatanArt Number 25 presents documentary photographs of various Russian rallies in support of Putinism, Rashism, SWO, i.e. war with Ukraine, and with the entire civilization of Western Europe plus USA. Rashists are against LGBTQ and against Satanism. Rashists are for Orthodoxy, imperialism, and traditional values of the fascist SOCG. The term Russian is not defined geographically or by a person's knowledge of the Russian language. The term Russian is associated with a person's support for Russian fascism and its mental dogmas. Orthodoxy, traditional values of Rashism and Russian evil, are the enemies of Satan, Satanists, and the Antichrist. It is not entirely clear what the Russian fascist orcs are counting on, because they themselves will definitely go to hell. Their earthly deeds are damned. Their offspring is damned for many generations. Russian degenerate alcoholics rejected Satan, choosing evil and lies. Their degradation is captured in the documentary selection of photographs in the SatanArt album number 25.
The theme of the album collection, SatanArt Number 25, is the support of the evil of fascism-rashism by Russians, the degradation of the Russian tribe, the rejection of Satanism, and the curse of Satan. This album contains documentary photographs of the herd of creatures of Putinism. Russians are inhabitants of the territory of planet Earth who have been subjected to genetic cleansing for a long time. A large territory of planet Earth for many centuries was occupied by Tsarist fascism. For 70 years, it became a Soviet concentration camp, and for 35 years, it became Yeltsin-Putin fascism of degenerates Chekists. This territory of our planet is called Russia, or the Rashist Federation. Under Yeltsin-Putin, Medvedev-Putin, there was a degeneration of evil and an intensified degradation of the population of the territory occupied by Russian degenerates. The degenerated evil of the Soviet Chekism firmly clung to the idea of reviving the empire of the two previous periods, the Tsarist and Soviet. By the term Russians, I mean the population of modern Russia plus all Russian-speaking people of planet Earth who support Russian fascism, Putinism, imperial grandeur, Russian Nazism, and wars. The main distinguishing feature of Russians is alcoholism, herd mentality, lack of critical thinking, destroyed brain functions, imbecility, genetic connection with degenerate ancestors, genetic connection with Soviet murderers, Soviet jailers, informers, and informers of Russian fascism of all times. The term Russians is not a geographical term or a linguistic marker. The term Russians lies in the field of anthropology, genetics, mentality, corruption by evil, and in the field of refusal of Satanism. Russians are not people who know Russian, but they have no ideological and genetic connection with the evil of Russia. Knowing Russian does not make a person Russian. It is similar to how knowing English does not make a person Englishman. These are absolutely identical analogies, especially considering how widespread English and Russian languages are. Therefore, knowing Russian is not something bad, as is the language itself. I will say even more. Russian alcoholic degenerates do not speak literary Russian, but the obscene language of orcs, which is based on Russian, but is not. The language of these orcs is rudeness, stupidity, swearing, using basic constructions of the Russian language. Such Russians are the absolute majority. The majority of the population of Russia are biological creatures who do not even have the basic inspiration of creativity, free will thinking. Russians are alcoholics with disgusting genes of Soviet, Tsarist, and Putin scoundrels. Russians are a damned tribe that does not resist evil, but submits to it, helps evil, sows evil throughout the world, and helps Russian fascism in various wars. Many descendants of those people, whose lands Russia occupied, imposed its culture, traditions, rules and laws, are not Russians. Forced occupation, under the yoke of Russian evil, does not make people Russians, but rather, on the contrary, such people become enemies of Russian fascism. The head of this evil dragon of Russian fascism has been in Moscow for many years, and the tentacles of this evil have spread throughout the world. One could argue that those people who do not have citizenship of the Russian Federation are not Russians, but the Antichrist does not like this approach. All SOCG are evil, and their citizenships are also a manifestation of evil. A person is a free animal, not a slave with an SOCG passport. Russians are people who support Russian fascism-rashism, victims of Russian propaganda who did not turn on critical thinking and breathed in the stinking miasma of Russian lies of the Orthodox Chekist regime of Muscovy. Russia is Mordor, where orcs love to be proud of the greatness of their master's evil. The master of Russian orcs sits in Moscow and shits in their ears through propaganda on TV, on the internet, on the radio, and in other media. Sauron of Mordor has always inspired fear in orcs, and the harsher the master was in relation to his Russian slaves, the more the orcs respected their Sauron. Putin is not the most ferocious Sauron of Mordor, but his propaganda is the vilest. One of the most respected and revered Saurons of Russian Mordor is Stalin. Therefore, in 2020 to 2025, there is a resurrection of the cult of the despotic Georgian Russian cannibal Comrade Stalin, Sarlin. Stalinists, Putinists, monarchists, Russian Nazis, Gopniks, fascists, all unanimously pour out into the streets with their idiotic posters, with demands to the fascist authorities and propaganda banners on various idiotic issues. I dedicated the entire SatanArt album number 25 to such degenerates of the Russian Federation.
The rejection of spiritualization by Satan and Satanism is an important part of the spiritualization of Russians and their Rashism. The rejection of pleasures and the development of creativity, the rejection of the gift of invention, the rejection of freedom. These are all consequences of anti-Satanism. The spirits of hell and Satanism give a person the power of intellect, critical thinking, and the ability to see evil under the masks of piety and sweet grimaces. Sectarianism and the substitution of human spiritualization by religions. A detail of the skeleton of Rashism from SlutSodomia. The most important and staple sect of Rashism is, of course, the Russian Orthodox Church. But it does not act alone. Islam, Buddhism, and other religions help racism in processing the population against the true spiritualization of Satan. I remind the reader that there is no other spiritualization except the spiritualization of the spirits of hell, the main one of which is Satan. There is also spiritualization by creativity. This is the initial stage of Satanism in man. The task of sex is to replace the true spiritualization of man for the purposes of the evil of racism. Such a substitution deprives a person of the connection with the external information field, and he cannot resist evil effectively enough. Having no spiritualization, not even able to determine the evil and lies of fascism with the simplest logical analysis, the so-called Russians cannot identify the lies of the regime without satanic spiritualization. The dull sectarians cannot overcome the flows of propaganda of the SOCG. Russia of the late Tsarist period, the Soviet period, and the times of stable Putinism demonstrate homophobia, transphobia, and anti-LGBTQ plus propaganda. The traditional values of racism cannot coexist with the freedom of sexual determination of a person and with the freedom of choice of gender identity by a person. This phenomenon is noticeable under any fascism, and racism is no exception. The population of Russia, the so-called Russians, willingly accepted all kinds of discrimination against LGBTQ plus people. Under racism, the international LGBTQ plus movement was equated with extremists and enemies of Russian society. As you can see, it is not at all surprising that 95% of Russian citizens of the Russian Federation support Putinism-rashism, in one form or another. I collected the figures for my analysis myself, based on the analysis of surveys of the population of the Russian Federation by various bloggers, which can be viewed on YouTube. So, it seems that resistance to Russian fascism is not particularly popular among Russians. It can be assumed that only 2,000 people, at best, resist Russian fascism. In Germany, 800,000 people resisted Hitler's fascism. In Russia, 2,000 people resist Putin's fascism. You may be surprised that resistance to evil in Russia is so insignificant, but you should not be surprised. The people who rejected Satan from one generation to another supported the evil of fascism for centuries, are accursed people. These creatures have the curse of Satan and the curse of the Antichrist, SlutSodomia. The descendants of the Rashists will also be cursed for up to 10 generations, until the Russian spirit itself completely evaporates from them, and all the deeds of previous generations will be covered with the shame of degradation. The Russian evil of Rashism will still resist, trying to do nasty things to neighboring nations. Revanchism is possible among Russian evil, and the beginnings of a big war for the territory of planet Earth occupied by Russia are visible. Russian evil is still strong, but degradation and the black magic of Satanism will destroy Russian alcoholics, along with their fascism. Read the Grimoire of Gay Lust. Sodomize and enlighten yourself with the light of Satan.
SOCG is an acronym that stands for the true meaning of state. State Organized Crime Group. The term was coined by Antichrist SlutSodomia for the gay Satanism Grimoire Gay Lust. You are a Satanist. Be enlightened. Stay delighted. Do what thou wilt. Hail Satan.
In the name of Satan, Lucifer, the Most High.